From the present year, 2020, we have just 1 decade left in which to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And while this short-term horizon is vital to our planning and progress, we also have to take a much longer view of sustainability. What might the world and our lives look like in 2050? How will we work? How will our relationship change? And how can we prepare ourselves today for a potential future? This session on the future of the world features conversationists Vikas Pota, Olivier Oullier, Yonca Dervişoğlu, and Ailish Campbell, discussing how tools like digitalization, technology, and science can help us prepare for 2050 today. And this concludes my service as an MC with you today. Enjoy the rest of the day and the program tomorrow. Goodbye.
Hello, I'm thrilled to be moderating a session today on the future of the world. You'll allow me, this is an incredibly ambitious title for this session and the conversation that we're going to have today, but I know that my fellow panelists are up to it. And it's not simply that we're going to talk about the future. I'm joined today by experts from technology, education, and science in order to talk about the possible futures that may confront us. None of us have all of the answers. None of us even have half of the answers that would prepare us even for the year ahead. But thinking about the Sustainable Development Goals and the powerful framework that the United Nations has provided us to measure, track, and aspire to greater progress is a way in which we can each think about the possible futures that could affect our environment, our work, our families, and our communities. Before I welcome our panelists, a very quick but very warm thank you to Savannah Hochmerin, to the Reykjavík Global Forum. We are thrilled to be here with you, and no matter where you're joining us from the world, this is going to be a conversation that we hope advances your understandings and provokes some thoughtfulness that you can bring back to whatever work and personal environment you're operating in. So also thank you to everyone joining us. I have Yonca, I have Olivier, I have Vikas with us. We're going to dive right into our first questions. Thank you so much to each of you for joining us. Yonca, you come to us from the world of technology, an incredible global leader in Google, and a company that is looking out not only with intention about technology for its immediate citizens, but also about how that technology can help create more inclusive and impactful growth. It's a real game changer if we can get more people to access technology. What is Google's both role and responsibility in bridging this digital divide? And how far are you ready to go? What is the ambition of Google's commitment in this area?
Thanks, Ailish. It's a great honor to be here. If only I was in Reykjavík with you all. I've been really looking forward to today. So thanks for having me. The question that you ask is a question that's really dear to my heart as a Turkish person who grew up in Turkey with her Encyclopedia Britannicas, feeling really privileged about that access to information. And of course, as someone who works at Google, has been there 14 years, where I'm really proud of the work Google has done in this area. And I think I'd like to look at it in 5 ways. I see technology as a great equalizer in terms of access to information, in terms of access to phones or cheaper phones so that everybody can access the internet through a device. That's not enough. It needs to be through cheaper data, and it needs to be accessible for everyone, whether they can hear or write and speak, and it needs to provide the skills. Those are the 5 things I think that also Google has been doing really great work, and I'd like to just say a quick thing about each. In terms of access to information, as you know, that's at the core of our mission. I'm reminded of Louis XIV. When he wanted to find out about the Qing dynasty, he sent an expedition of scientists and mathematicians who, he wanted to know the size of the Qing dynasty, its capital, how many people live there, what can we learn from them? And he sent an expedition that took 5.5 years until they got back and had the answers. And today we're all Louis XIVs, and we all have access to the same information in a matter of split second. But that brings me to the second point I made about having the data, having the devices. If we don't have cheap devices, billions of people who are not online today will not be able to access that information. So Android, of course, has been a great enabler of cheap devices and information, down to the $50 Android phones that we have today in Africa, and then cheap data. You have the information, you have the device, but the data plan is very expensive. Again, our work with companies like Safaricom or Everywhere to enable access to cheap data plans is really important, and I'm proud of. And then, of course, things like read along or voice to speech, so that people who can't type or hear, accessibility for everyone. And then the last one is skills. You have the phone, you have the data plan, you have Android. What about the skills? Not everyone has the skills. That's why we've committed and trained 70 million people for free globally, and committed to 10 million more in Europe in the next 2 years, of which 50% are women. So I'm really proud of that. And I think all those 5 are really important in answering that question.
Yonca, I hope you'll allow me. I'm sure, like me, one of your favorite sustainable development goals is equality for women. Yeah. And girls, and economic empowerment of girls. Can you just follow that up quickly with a sense of where Google and your work just more broadly is trying to take better connection of girls and women to enable their economic empowerment for 2030?
So, I'm a woman. I have 2 daughters. We spoke about it. So it's very personal to me, but it's also very important to Google. So like I said, it's the biggest difference we can make at scale is through our products and programs. And how can we make our products very inclusive? How can we make our programs like digital skills training, make sure that 50% are women, which they are? But another way is through programs dedicated to this, like I Am Remarkable. So we have this program that a couple of young women in my team came up with, which now is a program that's been a training that's been to 150,000 women globally, across 130 countries. And it just based on the premise that women are less confident to talk about their abilities, their achievements, and how can we help them see that talking about their achievements is not bragging. So, and this week is I Am Remarkable week, so we're doing lots of events in that area. But that's just, I think, through our products, through our at-scale programs, and of course through programs like, dedicated programs like I Am Remarkable.
That was great. And I can only build on that by saying one of the key learnings I've had over the last few years is also reaching out to fathers and educating men about the value of their daughter's education. And I'm glad that you're a big part of that in your work around the world. It's going to be critical going forward. Vikas, to build on that point, education, it might not be everything in the short term, but man, it sure feels like in the long run, everything has got to be based on improvements to education. You've been very involved as the founder of T4 Education, as well as your philanthropic work around modernizing education. Sometimes it feels like we're stuck in the 19th century. You're trying to drag us into the 21st century and having a lot of successes. What are some of the key trends that you see from now to 2030 in education that are critical for all of us to be aware of?
Thanks a lot, Ailish. And I echo your congratulations to this organization, to Silvana, for everything that she has put together and has achieved so far. Ailish, when I promised Silvana that I wouldn't be negative in my outlook and we only want to be positive. But before I go to the positive, I have to tell you that the situation that we find ourselves in today with regards to education is nothing short of what you and I would describe as a leadership vacuum. Education, because it's so long-term in nature, political leaders, and it's important to say this on this platform, my analysis and my experience is that political leaders just pay lip service to education reform because partly you only see the results of what you decide today, 10, 15 years down the line. And by that time, we've had 2 different prime ministers or presidents, four or five different education ministers, and you've kicked the ball down the line. And so one of the most encouraging things as a result of the pandemic is everyone is now paying attention to education. And so that is what I'm really optimistic about. And you see that in a number of different ways. And so when I look at, for example, technology, and Yonca was speaking about, Google's programs in this area, for years we've grappled with this subject as to why everyone still sits facing front towards a blackboard, and why the teacher stands at the front, and why nothing has fundamentally changed. And now what we're seeing is the greater acceptance and adoption of technology in our classrooms and through our homes, which I think will bring in a revolution when it comes to improving learning outcomes. The second actually game changer for me that I've seen as a result of the pandemic is the level of interest by parents. So engagement by parents and communities in what happens in education, I think can be a massive game changer. You yourself, Ailish, we've spoken about this in the past as to the level of interest you show in your own kids' education. Well, I hope that most of the world would also follow your lead in that regard and do that. And the pandemic has actually shown and illustrated that, people do care and they need to pay attention to this. And so that's the second silver lining that I see out of the pandemic. And the third is around teacher status. So you talk about the SDGs in particular. To deliver SDG number 4, which is on quality education, we need 69 million new teachers between now and 2030 to be recruited, trained, and in jobs. Now, when I look at that, you think, okay, actually what we should be talking about is quality education. And so the best people to go into teaching. And the pandemic, what it has done is brought a focus on the importance of the profession. And I think that's a really important pivot that's happened, where in countries like the UK, we've had this teacher recruitment and retention crisis, which has now turned as a result of the pandemic, with people paying more interest in teaching as a profession that they want to join. And so here are 3 things that I think that we have a lot to be optimistic about. It doesn't necessarily echo what people want to hear about the future of education being all tech-enabled and all shiny gadgets everywhere. But certainly these 3 things, I think, together combined, hold great promise to the reform of education systems the world over.
Thank you so much, Vikas. I think you've really touched on both the technology opportunities, the break point that the pandemic has provided for us to look at these issues, but the real human element of this. What's one action that each of us, wherever we are in the world, could take to lift up and recognize teachers today or right now during the pandemic? Do you have advice for us?
It's really simple, actually. Go thank a teacher. This is not complicated stuff. And so when you drop your kid off to school, if they are in school, if you're doing Zoom lessons or on Microsoft Teams or Google Classroom, forgive me, Yonca, I would just say that, Parents' Evening is coming up in most parts of the world. When you see the teacher, just thank them. They are going through an amazing disruptive learning kind of process themselves. And we need to hold hands. When there's a mutual friend of ours who often talks about, when she goes to Parents' Evening, it's not about little Johnny and the teacher, it's team. We have to work together because we're in this together.
That's wonderful advice. And right now, thank you to every teacher that might be watching this with their classrooms and their kids. This one's for you. And Vikas, thank you for championing teachers. You personally have done so much for this issue, and we'll keep following your advice on this one. Olivier, I'm thrilled to bring you into this conversation because you have technology. We've talked about the human and digital elements of the future, and your research has been so fundamental to helping us understand the human brain and consciousness. I can't imagine a more important topic for now and the future. We're experiencing just a huge volume of change right now in the pandemic, and as people are fond of saying, the world has never changed more quickly, and yet it will never be slower than today because the pace is only accelerating. Are we capable of dealing with the pace of change neurologically? How are our brains adapting? And what's your advice for us to keep healthy during the years ahead? What actions can we take? Over to you.
Thank you, Ambassador Campbell. And I join all of you in congratulating Silvana and her team on this wonderful event. When it comes to our brains, it is incredible when we think today that the biggest impact that the COVID-19 has had on us, if we don't talk about the lives that have been lost, is how it changed our daily lives and our behaviors. Yet there is little interest in behavioral sciences when it comes to understanding this impact. A lot of people with best intentions at heart are interested in the effect it has on our mental health. And we're in an era where mental health is beyond the stigma that made a lot of people afraid of sharing what they're experiencing. What we've been witnessing with this global pandemic is the fact that we can deal with it. The question is not whether our brain can adapt. We can. We might need some time depending on who we are. And that's one of the key issues that is not addressed enough today, is how different we each are. It's the diversity, not only in terms of gender, ethnicity, but also at the cognitive and the mental health level. And what we need today is to rely more on science and technology in order to allow people to adapt even better to all these changes. One way to do so is to create environments that are responsive to who we are, but also how we feel at a given moment. Think about workplaces. For a lot of people, the workplace has switched from their office to their home with an entire new environment. With best intentions at heart, leaders of public and private organizations have been worrying from day one the effect these changes and the pandemic would have on mental health of their employees, their friends, and their families. However, most of the solutions that have been provided so far in a lot of organizations have been a one-size-fits-all set of recommendations on how to deal with distraction, fatigue, sleep trouble, and all these things we all experience. What science and technology together can bring is to finally better measure and understand how our brain reacts, to be ready. I think what we need from now on is to work on the readiness of people to deal with such events. This is unfortunately the first of many other events that are going to disrupt our lives. Yet there is hope. The hope comes from data. Collecting data is important. Making sense of data is even more important. And making sense of data in order to personalize our interaction with technology, to personalize our workplace, our work experience. This is the key today. Our brains will adapt, but thanks to technology, we can boost our brains, we can assist us, and it's okay to feel down. It's okay not to be okay. A lot of companies have realized that. A lot of tech companies are invested massively in mental and brain health. Google, no later than last week, made a big announcement and entered our field of neurotechnologies, and we welcome them. So, Elon Musk with Neuralink. We got lots of big players in tech who finally understand and invest in what is our number one human capital, our brain. We hear a lot about human-centric environments, human-centric design, personalized education. But if we don't understand and measure how our brain is at various moments of the day, we will not be able to have these customized environments. So once again, it's all about forgetting the one-size-fits-all solutions. It's great to hire a wellness or mindfulness guru to speak at tens of thousands of employees. It might be very entertaining, but it's even better if you provide customized solution. We are unique, and uniqueness is very hard to handle without science and technology. Rigorous science with the help of all the big techs. That is the combination. This is how we can adapt.
Olivier, there's a nice crosswalk between your focus on personalization and Yonca's opening of our session around the importance of data. about how we can empower ourselves and each other to live in that world where data and personalization will be one of the key themes that takes us to 2050. Again, same question I asked Vikas. What's one action we could take today to become more aware and prepare for that future? And you've got 20 seconds.
We need to, I will build on what Vika said, which is really important, not just with teacher. We need to thank the teacher, we need to thank people, and we need to be aware of how lucky we are compared to others. Of course, there are always other people who seem more fortunate, richer, wealthier, healthier than us. But generally, there are a lot more people who are not as lucky as we are. And I think that being able to show gratitude and to acknowledge what is good in us is the first step to being able to be ready to deal with hardship.
Gratitude. That's a great last word. Thank you so much to each of our panelists, and thanks to each of you who joined us.